First of all, thanks obviously for taking the time to do this, but I do
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, of
Um,
course.
to start, what is your name and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Ryan Grenier, and I'm a chiropractor here in Wichita, Kansas.
Perfect. And
Yeah,
then you're at Optimal Wellness, correct?
yep, at
Yep.
Optimal Wellness.
Okay. And then
I
so
got the
what?
swag on.
Yeah, I see you. I see you got the shirt on too.
Yeah, yeah,
So what sports and or sports teams are you associated with?
yeah. So we work with a lot of different sports teams, but I would say the most frequent one is probably the soccer teams around Wichita.
Nice. And then the
Yeah,
ones that play at like striker and stuff.
yeah. So we have a couple that play at striker. We have some that play on the west side. So yeah, I mean, kind of all over.
Cool. And
Yeah.
then, so what is the day away from the sports side? But what does a day-to-day agenda look like?
Yeah, so typical day is so we'll usually go into the office for like around 9. So depending on like what day, we can see anywhere between 20 to 30 patients in that day. Um, and I mean that's kind of like a wide range, but our patient base is anywhere between I'd say like mid 20s to like mid 60s is probably like our typical patient. But obviously we can have some outside of that too.
Cool. So as far as I mean, for anyone, what does the like assessment of injury typically look like?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest thing that I start out with is obviously we want to go through a consultation, so that way I can just learn a little bit more about the patient. From there, typically we can figure out the MOI or method of injury, and then based off of that, what I'll typically do is that's kind of what I base my whole exam around.
Sorry.
So, no, you're good. But really, what we can do based off of that is, I'll take patients through different movements, or I'll have them go through movements. We can figure out what's actually like causing their pain.
Hmm.
And then, if we need to, always in our office, we can take X-rays of that injury as well. So,
Cool. And then so back to the sports side.
yeah.
Um, when you're working with like an injured athlete, how what does the communication or what's the relationship look like with the PAs, the PTs, ATs, just the whole other sports staff?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the level of play. I mean, when we've had professional athletes come in, you're working a lot with their athletic trainers. So, I mean, you have to have really good communication. They want to know exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it. But if you're working with, like the typical weekend warrior kind of athlete, then, a lot of it is just that kind of one-on-one relationship. And then based off of what I'm finding, if I feel comfortable treating it, obviously I'll kind of manage their care plan. But if I find something that I'm not comfortable with, then I'll refer them out to PTs that we work with and those kinds of
Mhm.
people. So
I'd be in that example of the weekend warrior.
me too. So yeah.
Yeah. So like, is there a certain protocol that or like assessment that the athlete must complete for you to actually like give the okay, or is that something that they would decide on themselves?
Yeah, so again, depending on the level of athletes, but like for like the soccer teams that we work with, typically what I say is, depending on the severity of their injury, I will kind of return them to some form of movement. So if they're going through their movements and their pain's at like a 3 out of 10 or below, then they get that green light to do that movement.
Mhm.
Um, if I kind of work with them for a little bit, they're having less and less pain with certain movements, then I'll start to kind of like allow them to go back to their typical activity. But the hardest part with athletes is obviously they want to play right now. They don't want to take any days off, so it's more so kind of talking to them about what's okay and what's not okay kind of thing.
Mhm. And then, so like you said, working with athletes wanting to get back on the field is probably their number one priority.
Yeah,
How do you pick out, the liars and like the people who are just telling you what you want to hear?
yeah. So that's when you can really going through that kind of exam on that day one visit, you figure out what is causing them pain, and what's not causing them pain. So, if they say they're feeling good, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right back to that exam. So I'm going to take them through those movements that cause pain on that first day. And yeah, I mean, if they're good with it, then they can return to activity. But if they're still kind of wincing and having some problems, that's when we'll kind of switch things up. And I basically limit their activity. With athletes, you never want to fully take away their movement because
Mhm.
obviously that's their stress outlet. So, you got to figure out that line or happy median of like what's okay and what's not okay.
Mhm. So I know that there's a lot of communication involved. How important would you say listening skills be involved, or how important would you say they are?
Yeah, I would say that's probably the most important thing. I mean, if you essentially are listening to patients or you're listening to your athletes, I mean, they're going to tell you what's wrong. It's basically just like a big puzzle that you got to listen to, and then from there you can form an exam and kind of go through things that way. If you're just not really paying attention to the athlete and you're already thinking ahead of what orthopedic tests or what am I going to do with this athlete, you're going to miss a lot of valuable information.
Mhm. So what would you say is the most difficult thing in your opinion as working as a chiropractor?
Mine's probably like a little off key. I think, chiropractors, majority of us are small business owners. So the biggest thing on our side of things is we got to do all of our marketing. So, that's why you see a lot of us out at events on weekends, or we're working with, different teams and stuff like that because we're just trying to get our name out there. And
Mhm.
it takes a lot of work. I mean, marketing is a lot of work. Working with patients and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's why we are chiropractors. I mean, that's the fun part. But yeah, my hardest thing is probably more the marketing side of things.
Kind of funny because so that video that we recorded, the one that I was included in,
Yeah,
I have friends that send it to me and be like, "Oh, I
yeah,
saw you in
yeah,
this," and I'm like, "Yeah,
yeah.
you should go see him."
I know, right? Yeah, it's
Trying to give it word of mouth. But
yeah,
so outside of the actual office itself or like the consultation with you, how do you address the social factors that play into injury other than the sport itself? Like stress management, and all that other, that fit in that umbrella or that dome.
yeah. It's really hard. I mean, obviously you can meet several athletes and they all come from different backgrounds. And some of them, it's like, yeah, they're an athlete. That's all they know. And you have a lot of social factors that are kind of like trying to push them back into the sport, and that's why some of them return to play a little bit too early. So I think going back to the communication side of things, like talking with that athlete, sitting them down and saying, like, look, I'm not saying that you can never play again or that you shouldn't play, but like, we got to get you back to the level that you're accustomed playing to, or else you're going to be right back in my office, or worse, you're going to suffer a more severe injury. So
Mhm.
it's really hard trying to figure that kind of like balance out and again, just figuring out what kind of pressure is outside. Because, like I said, you can't take movement or you can't take this sport away from this athlete because majority of the time that's their stress outlet. That's what they do. So you really got to listen to those social factors.
So how important would you say, practicing injury prevention is for an individual?
Yeah, I mean it's really important. I mean, especially for your athletes. Your body is basically what you're relying on. So if you're not doing a lot to counterbalance some of those, things that are going to cause injuries, you're just almost like a ticking time bomb. I mean, you might go years without having an injury, but at some point you're gonna suffer the consequences. So you got to
Mhm.
really do something to focus on your recovery. And I would say, you really got to hone in on your sport and figure out what's going to benefit you the most for the sport that you're playing.
Mhm. So what, in your opinion, would be the best practice or best form of injury prevention? Some people go prehab, some people, that kind of stuff. What would be your best form in your opinion?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, at the end of the day, you really got to focus on movement. Like for my soccer athletes, so kind of going back to what I was saying, I mean, for my soccer athletes, I'm not going to have them focus on a bunch of different shoulder activities and things to bulletproof their shoulders. I'm going to have them, bulletproof their hips, their knees, their ankles. And then also on top of that, like you got to do some form of, eating healthy and those kinds of things because, toxins, if you're, drinking alcohol and you're playing sports and those kinds of things, they're going to hurt your tissues and then you're eventually going to have a tissue injury. So, You got to do a lot to not only focus on the outside, but you got to do a lot to focus on the inside too. So,
Hmm.
yeah, just focusing on diet or movement is probably one of the bigger things.
Well, yeah, definitely a lot of information there, but that's pretty
Yeah.
much all I had for you.
Okay, cool, man.
Mm, yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time for me. Taking it. I know my schedule's been pretty booked up, so I haven't been able to come into the office, but I think I should be able to this week. I finally got a day off,
Okay,
so
cool, man. Yeah.
I'll be seeing you sometime this week.
Yeah, for
I'll
sure.
just
I was gonna
shoot a
say
text over the office.
if you need something, just let me know.
All right, sounds perfect. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate it again.
Yeah.
Good talking to you.
Yeah. Have a good one, Victor.
All right, yeah, you too. Bye.
All right.